Hello, I am Chris McDowell and I'm here to read through Into the Odd Remastered. And this will not be an impartial read through because, as you can see, this is a game that's written by me. And the graphic design and art has been by Johan Null, who you may know from Mortborg and various other projects. And if you are a keen follower, you will know that we already did a read through on the stream, but we were plagued by all sorts of technical issues. So I thought we're going to do it again. And we're not live on stream. This is a pre-recorded read-through. But I thought I'd take you on a quick little look through Into the Odd Remastered, talk about what it is, talk about how it's different to Into the Odd if you already have that game, or if you have Electric Bastion, how it's different to that, or if you've never played or heard of either of those games, what is this game at all? So, this version that I have here is not a final version, but it is largely representative of what we are going to be putting in the final print version. The main changes are there are a few little there are still a few little errors in here that we need to fix. So if you see something weird in the text as I'm going through, I'm sure it's on the list of things that we are in the process of fixing, but the art and layout are all pretty much done, except for like one or two pages where it's kind of obvious where there's more to happen there. So Into the Odd is an attempt to make a game that is extremely rules light while having a lot of flavour of its own, in the context of being a sort of treasure hunting, dungeon crawling kind of game. But with more of a kind of horror and exploration angle, rather than being a game about combat. So, as you can see, this game is a collaboration between myself, who you may know from Electric Bastion and Into the Odd, and other stuff that I do at bastionland.com, and Johan Null. And I'm a big fan of projects that have small teams, I think. The more I follow projects and the more I read other people's work, I always enjoy a piece of work when I feel like it's really got the voice of like one person or maybe two people, and that's why I think it takes me back to like the blogs, I suppose. And like what's so exciting about like the blogosphere sometimes is like if I'm reading a blog by a certain person, it feels like I'm getting a very distilled, condensed version of their work. It feels like it's sort of unmistakably their work sometimes, and I wanted to kind of get that on the page as well. So I did have like some guest writers on Electric Bastion, but I wanted to keep this very kind of pure and very kind of like one person's vision, if you like, in terms of the writing. And same with the graphic design and the art. I wanted Johan to kind of have full control on this. So generally, if Johan ran something past me and it was a bit weird, I said yes. I should say this game is being published by Bastionland Press, with Free League handling distribution and the printing process. So I'm sure you're familiar with Free League and some of the games that they make. But this is a little bit different. This is closer to the arrangement they had with Mortborg. So although Free League have been very helpful so far with helping out with like talking about printing and distribution, the actual work inside the book has been entirely the work of myself and Johan. So if you have previously played Into the Odd, the table of contents will look kind of similar, because I wanted this to be this is definitely a remaster rather than like a revision. So it's a remastered edition in the sense that the previous version of the game, which was this very kind of small softback book, it was print on demand for a large portion of its life. I wanted to take that and kind of blow it up into something that was a little bit more usable at the table, a little bit more visual flair, and but all the while preserving the original kind of game, because a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about this game now, and I've almost treated this remaster as if it's someone else's game. With Electric Bastion, which is my other game, I kind of went a bit wild and made the book as if I was making it 100% for myself. With this game, it's still a book that I want to have on my shelf, absolutely, and I want to play this game. But I've also made sure that I am respecting the people who are very who have lots of positive feelings towards the original Into the Odd, and as such, most of the rules and things are actually the same as what you might have seen in Into the Odd, the previous edition. The biggest obvious difference is the layout here and the artwork, because we actually have a lot more white space. So with the original Into the Odd, I tried to cram as much stuff onto each page as I could just to get the page count right down. But here things have got a bit more room to breathe, especially when you get to the rules. You'll see what I mean. For the artwork, Johan has produced a lot of work drawing on kind of old public domain books. Like we kind of wanted the book to feel almost like an artifact. So the text is all quite clear and kind of quite traditional in many ways, and sort of very crisp and orderly, but then the art can get a little bit chaotic, and you'll see there are some that has kind of hidden messages and notes in it. So we wanted the text to feel kind of orderly and the art to feel a bit more chaotic and weird. So if you've not played Into the Odd before, one of the big selling points is that when you create your character, it's very quick. So you roll for your strength, dexterity and willpower straight away, and you get some HP as well, which is hit protection. And then those numbers give you a starter package, which gives you kind of like a few bits of equipment that kind of suggest some stuff about your character without so much telling you specifically what that character is. So if you have a character that rolls a harpoon gun, a baton, some acid, and they are slightly magnetic, it's up to you to decide the sort of history of that character and where that stuff comes from. And some characters have like just weird things like dreams show your undiscovered surroundings, or immune to extreme heat and cold. But then some characters have an Arcanum, which we'll get to when we get to that section. But an Arcanum is basically the weird items that are responsible for a lot of the weirdness in this world. And that's character creation. It's that quick. Equipment list, there are a few changes. So if you are watching this video thinking what's changed from Into the Odd, from the original, there's a few things that have been sort of rolled back in from Electric Bastion. So the way that armor works, the sort of classes of armor are from Electric Bastion, because it works a little bit better in my experience. But I've largely tried to sort of respect the original text here. And I'm a big fan of equipment lists that kind of tell you about the world. So hopefully this equipment list is kind of gives you an indicator of the kind of industrial horror world that this game takes place in. So previously, I was a big I used to just boast all the time about how Into the Odd, all of the rules fit on a single A5 page. However, the disadvantage of that is it can feel a little bit much. It can feel a bit like reading a sort of small print newspaper. So we've actually given the rules space to breathe. So whereas the rules were previously one page, the rules are now spread across 4 pages if we exclude the art. But the rules are still super simple. In fact, I can tell you basically the whole system right now. So if you need to make a save to avoid danger, you roll a d20 and you're aiming to get equal or less than your ability score. So if you're making a dexterity save and you've got dexterity 11, you need to roll 11 or less on a d20. And when you attack, the other big selling point of of Into the Odd is that combat is very fast and decisive. So when you attack a target or you get attacked, you roll damage based on the weapon. So it might be a d8 for a musket, and you cause that much damage to your target, like no questions asked. There's no rolling to hit, you always cause damage. However, HP in this game isn't really like HP in other games. HP is like a buffer. So if you lose HP from an attack, that's your hit protection that's protecting you. So you aren't really hit if you still have HP left. However, when you run out of HP, any further damage will come off your strength score instead, and that represents like actual wounds. And these are the ones that have the potential to be deadly. And damage to your HP is very quick to get back. It's just a drink of water and a rest for a few minutes, and your HP comes back. But damage to your strength is much more kind of difficult to get rid of, and that require a long rest. So these are the rules. If you're sort of following in from Into the Odd the original game, you'll see that there are a few little additions like Blast and Deprived that are things that have come in from Electric Bastionland. But I've tried to stick to rules that don't like have too much, that don't interlock too much with like other things in the game. So they're just little rules that are like little tools almost. So Deprived, you might not even need to use this depending on the type of game you're running, but it's a useful tool to have in the toolbox. Now, as mentioned, the this version of the document, there are a few changes to come. So I know that this reaction section, for instance, has been rewritten, and there are going to be some changes before the final release. Arcana. So these are your weird items that you are potentially spending a lot of time looking for, and you might even start with one of these. And they are essentially magic items that always work, and they do something weird. They're sort of inspired by the likes of the portable hole, the immovable rod, some of those sort of artifacts that do things that really break the rules, rather than being like, oh, a +1 sword. They all do something weird. So the Gatekeeper's Sigil is kind of essentially a portal gun. And then you've got things like the Flesh Tome of Babel, which lets you speak to any living thing, which is like a real game changer. Like just having that in your game makes the game entirely different. And one of the big changes from the previous Into the Odd is that there are more of these. So when you start, you roll a d6. If you start with an Arcanum, you roll a d66, and that gives you one of 36 starting Arcana. And then there are more in the game. We have an example of play, which there's a lot of... I went back and revisited this, and it's easy to sort of think of examples of play as being like purely theoretical things that people put in just out of tradition. But I think it's genuinely a useful way to like present the world and present some of the kind of expectations of how the game's going to work. So I am happy with this one. And the thing that I like is that it's the three characters, so Toku, Ezekiel, and Uthred, are three of the characters that were in the very, very first playtests of Into the Odd, which happened, I think it was like the 10th anniversary recently of the early playtests, which is shocking news to me that it's been 10 years since we started testing this game. So, advancement in Into the Odd is based on achieving things. So to advance from novice to professional, you just need to survive an expedition. And that'll get you some more HP, and maybe your ability scores will go up. It's a very simple system because you are going to get slightly better just from going up in experience levels, but the main way your characters are going to change are from accumulating resources, from getting hold of Arcana that let you do new things, and just from getting sort of warped and twisted in weird ways by the monsters in this world. There's a very simple system for Enterprise and War, and we've got a nice compact refereeing guide. So there was a hugely detailed, and that there is an error on this page if you are keen-eyed, that is being fixed. But in Electric Bastionland, there's like pages and pages of how to run the game. Here I did want to stick to the kind of really compact version that was in the original Into the Odd, and just kind of let it breathe with all this nice spacious layout. We have some notes on treasure, how to put obstacles, tricks, and hazards in your game. This piece of artwork is a nice nod to any serious hardcore fans of Into the Odd, because this little section was the original cover, and not this cover, but the original cover before there was even a print version. Back when I was doing layouts in MS Word, which is not a good time. And yeah, with the artwork, the thing that I like about using public domain artwork in the collages is it does give it this kind of sense of being like, we wanted it to feel like a kind of, like the book itself was an artifact, like something you might find in like a secondhand bookshop, and sort of look through it and see all these weird images. And also it means that the characters look quite grounded, which makes the weird stuff look even weirder, which I'm a big fan of. You've got guidance on how to run encounters. You've got some example monsters. This section is not quite finished yet. And then you have the world itself. So if you played Electric Bastionland, One way to think of this is that this is industrial Bastion land. So it's the same world. You've still got Bastion, you've still got the underground, you've still got deep country, but things are slightly different. So there are other cities. They're not quite the failed cities yet. And you've got the Golden Lands and the Polar Ocean, which are kind of like places that are hinted at existing beyond civilization. The Golden Lands is one of the main things that I changed because I wasn't happy with how that was presented in previous versions. The Golden Lands are a bit more abstract and weird now. But yeah, it's the same setting as Electric Bastion Land if you rolled it back, sort of imagine like 200, 300 years earlier. And the Iron Coral was one of the bits that people really loved in the original Into the Odd. In the original, it was a one-floor dungeon and a sort of small hex-based wilderness area around that dungeon. So what I decided to do for this is to completely blow it up. So rather than being a one-floor dungeon, it is now a 3-floor dungeon. Spoilers if you are planning on playing in this. I'm not going to go through each room, but I'm just going to glance through this section. So this is the original Iron Coral. It's 20 rooms on the first floor, and this is previously all that there was. Obviously, it's got like a nice shiny new layout, which is really sort of usable for just running this game, for just running this dungeon straight from the page. That's always been my goal with these dungeon descriptions. Like, they're very terse descriptions. So, just saying that, for instance, the things that are not marked in bullet points and bold are things that are immediately obvious. And then things that are noted in parentheses are things that require investigation to see. So if you're running the room, all you need to do is kind of go down the list and describe each bullet point that people will see. And then you've got different symbols to represent like strange effects, passageways in different directions and up and down. And the contents are slightly changed, but the concept is the same. But then, below the first floor, you've got the second floor, which is the underground breach. A marbling of the twisted familiarity of the underground and the living ocean itself. And I'm not going to show you everything that's in here. And then you've got the halls of glass and gold, which are the third level of this dungeon. And each of these levels are kind of the same sort of size as the original dungeon itself. So it's blown up to 3 times the size. The Fallen Marsh itself, which is kind of the area around the Iron Coral. This has been expanded as well, because previously the idea was people would travel from the Iron Coral to Hopesend to get back to sort of civilization. But very few groups would kind of wander off and explore this area itself, because it's kind of a horrible place. But now there are some more kind of hooks around in this area, and there are actually there are the hexes themselves. But then there's also a few little, almost like one-page dungeons that are there for people to go and explore. And then you have finally Hopesend, which is a little town which it's kind of acting as like a gateway to sort of get back to Bastion, really. And then finally the Oddpendium. This is just a giant section of random tables, which kind of tells you how to run. Doesn't tell you how to run the game, but it gives you ideas for how to run the world, and also just tells you about the world. I think just looking at what tables are in here tells you more about the world than sitting and reading a description. So just looking at what streets are like, what connection to the underworld look like, Bastion's great businesses, weird creatures. So you could have a creature whose nature is stinking filth. Their form is a spider. And their twist is that they conjure illusions. And then you can create your own creature from those kind of sparks. Same with astral cults. You can have the army of the half death, and they could be too old to criticize. So there's some cult that's just always existed in Bastion, the army of the half death. And yeah, these are just ways to help you run the game if you're improvising, especially. And a good number of these were in the original Into the Odd, but it has also been expanded with additional tables. including alternative character groups. So rather than just having the normal starter packages, you could be mutants from the underground, or you could be simple folk from the country, or you could be unhumans from Starfall, which was stolen away. The whole city was stolen, and the people came back different. And that is that. So that is Into the Odd Remastered. And this will be probably live on Kickstarter by the time this video goes up. So if you go to Kickstarter and look for Into the Odd Remastered, this is running from 21st of September 2021 for 30 days. And I'm pretty confident it's going to be something quite special. So check it out. And as always, if you want to find out more, you can go to bastionland.com. And if you want to get in touch with me specifically, if you go to bastionland.com, there is a Discord server on there, which is a good place to get hold of me. And yeah, hopefully you found this useful, and hopefully you will be impressed enough to back this on Kickstarter. So until then, it's goodbye for now.